Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Falkowski, Education Coordinator at Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve in Naples, Florida. We're so glad you could join us today for our EDscursion live from the field. Today, our topic is called Changing Shorelines. So just a few housekeeping things. I wanted to let you know that in this webinar format, we are not able to see you or hear you. So in order to communicate with us, we want you to use the chat box. So that is on the black toolbar at the bottom of your screen. In the chat box, you can send messages if you're having technical difficulties or if you need any kind of customer service help. That will go to the backend team that can help you with that. If you have a question for our speakers, which I hope that you will, you can use the option that's just to the left of that. It's called Q&A, and that's where you can put your questions so we can answer them at the end. You'll also notice that in the Q&A box, when someone asks a question, you're able to upvote or put a little thumbs up symbol next to the question you also want to be heard. That will help us prioritize which questions to answer at the end, since we only have a short amount of time to answer all of your questions. So I want to introduce some of the rest of the team members. You're going to see many of us today. On the screen now is the entire Ed team. You're going to see half of us on the back end working remotely from our home offices and half of us on the front end working from the field. But first, where are we and who are we? We are part of the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. So we're located right here along the Gulf of Mexico, but our sister sites that focus on research, education, and stewardship are located throughout the Gulf, along the West Coast in Pacific, including Hawaii and Alaska, throughout the Great Lakes, down the Eastern Seaboard, and through the Caribbean at our Puerto Rican Reserve. So there are 29 sites and almost 30. One is in current designation process in Connecticut. Very exciting. So more locally in Florida, we are part of the Department of Environmental Protection, Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. You can see all the National Estuarine Research Reserves highlighted here in yellow. So if you visited the Apalachicola area, the St. Augustine area, or the Naples area, you have been to one of ours or a sister reserve. But throughout Florida, DEP protects 4 million acres. So that's quite a lot. Now, more locally, this is a map of our boundary. So this gold star right here is the location of the Environmental Learning Center. Now, unfortunately, it is still closed due to the pandemic, but when we reopen, we'll be announcing to everyone so you can come and visit us. In the meantime, virtual programming is the next best thing. And it's really cool because you can go places that we wouldn't have been able to take you if we were open. So you can think of this as an armchair travel. So this map shows our boundary, our 110,000 acres. We manage everything inside of this yellow line here. So downtown Naples would be towards the top of your map. Today, our field cam is going to be broadcasting from this 7-mile unbridged barrier island called Keewaydin. Our boundary goes around Marco Island, this way around Cape Romano, through the 10,000 islands, and borders Everglades National Park down here with this stair-step boundary. So I want to turn it over to my colleague, Morgan. She's going to give you a little more orientation. Then she's going to introduce the rest of the back end, and we're going to go to the field. Okay, Morgan, what do you got for us?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our EDscursion this morning. Like Sarah said, I'm Morgan. I'm an education specialist at Rickery Bay. And this morning, we have a couple special guests with us. But for the back end, we are joined by a member of our research team. Jill is our GIS specialist in-house at Rookery Bay, and I'm going to let her tell her about the work that she does.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jill Schmidt. Like Morgan said, I'm part of the research team. I've been at Rickery Bay for a little over 20 years now. I'm the GIS specialist, which means I make all the maps. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System, which is just a fancy way of saying map maker. And I get to play with a lot of fun tools. And we'll be talking a little bit more. I'll be showing you some of my fun tools a little bit after we visit the field.
Wonderful. So field cam, as long as you're ready to get started, we would love to meet the rest of the education team and our other special guests. Take it away.
Let me turn my camera on real quick. Hi, my name is Dita. I'll talk to you more in a little bit. Hi, y'all. My name is Janine. I'm also part of the education team here. And yeah, we're going to be talking all about barrier islands today.
Hey everybody, my name's Sarah. I'm also on the research team here at the reserve and really excited to share one of my favorite.
All right, so where are we? On that map, Sarah kind of gave you an idea. We're on Keewaydin Island. This is a barrier island. So with that, it is acting as a barrier from between the mainland and the ocean, or in this case, the Gulf of Mexico. And this particular barrier island, we're on the southern tip, but it does extend north about 7.5 miles. And so it's really protecting our estuary, holding back this brackish system, this mix of fresh and salt water from all the elements that are out in the Gulf. Wind, wave action, summer storms, pirates, you name it. A lot of really important habitat here. And what we're going to get into today is that it's very dynamic. Jill's going to be showcasing that. This is a changing landform, basically. Our mangrove islands are anchored in, they're nice and holding tight, not moving around. But you're going to learn a lot more about the changes that this barrier island has seen actually over the last few decades. So let's get right into it. Sarah, why don't you tell us maybe about some of the history of Keewaydin Island?
Yeah, so where we are now on the southern tip actually did not exist, going back 30 or more years ago, and you'll get to see some imagery of that later on. But it's a really, really neat place. So going back to the late 90s, the shoreline of Keewaydin Island looked a lot like what's back behind us on Cannon and CO Island. So it might be a little hard to tell, but those tall trees in the background there are all Australian pines. So they are one of our many non-native species or exotic species that we have here in Southwest Florida. And previously, the shoreline of Keewaydin was chock full of them. Some were alive, some were dead, some were fallen over in the water. And it was really not a great thing to keep the shoreline of Keewaydin Island nice and healthy. There was a large grant that Rookery Bay was awarded to do a large-scale restoration and removal project here on Keewaydin Island. So essentially what happened, all those trees were taken off the island for a majority of it. So again, the island's about 7.5 to 8 miles long, depending on the year, which Jill will talk a little bit about later as well. So it was a really great thing because one, not only did it stabilize the shoreline and allow the island to do what it does naturally, increase and grow over time, but also opened up a lot of nesting habitat for nesting shorebirds and sea turtles as well.
Oh man, and we'll probably see some of that habitat when we cross over, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay, with these Australian pines, I mean, you say they're exotic and invasive. Like, can you just get a little bit more into that? Like, how would you manage for that? And what's the treatment and why is it so important?
Right.
Oh, we're getting buzz.
They again don't really help stabilize the shoreline. So what I mean by that is they grow in these large stands, they shade out other native plant species, and unlike other native plant species along our coastal habitats, we've got some sea oats right here next to us, and we're going to be walking through and IDing some of those later on this morning. The plants that are supposed to be here and that are native to the area hold the sand in place. So for now, the removal that occurred in the late 90s is awesome, but we still have to keep up with some management practices today. So because we have this large seed source behind us, so right now I'm holding up one of the pine cones from the Australian pine that was probably washed over from Cannon Island here. Land managers at Rookery Bay do have to come out every now and then to treat the pines that may start to sprout up here along Keewaydin Island. Other land management activities that occur would be prescribed fires. So every now and then this area will get burned to keep the native grasses and vegetation nice and happy and healthy, and that in turn supports potential nesting shorebirds in the summertime, which we'll talk more about later as well.
Awesome. Wow, I can't believe that this did not exist before. I mean, really, when I was born, probably. So that is incredible. And, you know, with the large stand across from us, is that just expensive to manage? I mean, could you just do a prescribed fire over there?
So, you know, we could attempt that, but there's not a whole lot of upland habitat there. And some of these exotic or non-native species don't really react to fire. So that's another problem that we experience here in the reserve, where some of these don't burn like our native plants do, which they need in order to, again, stay happy and healthy. So they can be a bit problematic, and depending on the species we're talking about, they may go about different ways of treating them. So in this particular case, in order to really jumpstart the health of Keewaydin Island, they came in, chopped the Australian pines at the base, and then removed those trees completely from the island. So
very resource intensive.
Yes, very resource intensive in terms of machinery, as well as, you know, staff and funding. So again, that type of removal out here on an unbridged barrier island, that price just goes up over time.
All right.
That's
Well,
amazing.
I am very glad that we get to use this resource here, Keewaydin. We get to see the management efforts literally right here behind us, because as Sarah mentioned, the sea oats, a lot of native biodiverse plants, creating awesome habitat for a string of wildlife. And we've been seeing some boaters come in, and that's because this is actually a great public access for these resources. And that's part of the mission of these reserves, is not only the research and monitoring, the education, but we want the public to know about these resources and make them available. So we're actually going to use one of the walkways that, you know, eliminates too much disturbance of the native plant life here. And we are going to cross over this island to the Gulf. And I think Dita is going to be pointing out some plants, maybe some clues that wildlife was around. And yeah, we'll see what it looks like on the other side. Woo. All right, let's go. Before we get all of our landers. So a lot of these tall grasses that you're seeing are what Sarah had mentioned, these sea oats, which are really, really helpful, because if you look, we have these wonderful white sandy beaches. We love to go sunbathe on it, make a sandcastle maybe, but it's not exactly the most stable of ground for plants. And so these sea oats actually help keep the sand in place and help other plants actually establish and start up a community here. Most of the plants that we're going to have in this area are going to have to be pretty fast growing and put up with a lot of harsh elements. They're getting salt spray from the ocean. They have to deal with the heat, with the sun, not a lot of fresh water. So these plants have to be very hardy. Grasses are very common, but you can see we also do have trees here as well. There's some mangroves in the background. You have some sea grape. Those are the ones with the flatter leaves. We have some cocoa palm and a whole host of other plants out here as well. And even though it is an island, there are lots of animals that rely on this habitat as well, from burrowing owls to gopher tortoises. We did see some tracks out here beyond human tracks a little bit earlier.
Field cam, it sure looks beautiful out there.
And you'll notice that it's going to be a little bit different on the Gulf side from our bay side or lagoon side. Oh, just had a very rare sighting of a native lizard, the green anole. You can actually turn brown.
It's probably very camouflaged into the green sea grapes. Ooh.
Those are always such a treat to see, because normally you just see the Cuban anoles, which are non-natives. And as Janine mentioned, we do have this walkway marked off so we don't damage the sea oats as people are going to explore, play in the Gulf. We want to make sure we keep these sea oats around as long and as healthy as possible. This is a common sea bean plant. If you ever see, we might find one on the shore, but this is
Coin vine.
has lovely little brown coin-shaped seeds.
They make great earrings.
There's one other thing. Here they are. So different tracks than what we saw last time,
Small mammal, maybe?
but they're pretty darn tiny. And I think we had one other one farther up, maybe. I can remember where it is. And sometimes sea oat the grasses here can fool you. So that's probably just the grass blowing in the wind on the sand.
You mean that's not a ghost crab?
I know, that's what I'm hoping we'll find. We actually did see an actual ghost crab.
Oh, here.
So there's a ghost crab burrow, and you can see all those lovely tracks coming out. That is a very, very feisty predator out here. All right, so we are approaching our lovely beach side. You can see the ocean hopefully a little bit. Have the garbage people are leaving out.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, I can see it. And it is a little breezy. So after we maybe learn some more about this side, we can mute and show them what it looks like, right?
Yeah, of course. So, Sarah, we talked about the importance of those Australian pines. What is using this barren beach other than our snowbirds visiting?
Yeah, so this time of year we get real snowbirds that we've got a nice flock of, it looks like royal terns back behind us. Maybe once we mute we can get a little bit closer, but we don't want to get too close that we disturb the birds. And then in the summer months, so coming up here just shortly, we're going to start to have some of our nesting shorebirds potentially using this area as a nesting habitat. So least terns or black skimmers. And then also we have nesting sea turtles that come up and use Keewaydin Island in the summer months as well. So
Wow.
our partners over at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida are the ones that manage and monitor the sea turtle nesting activity here on Keewaydin Island within Rookery Bay Reserve. And Jill actually does a lot of work with them to, some of her research projects, monitoring the sea turtle nest temperature. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jill, and she'll give you a little bit more background about Keewaydin and some of the work that happens out here.
Nice.
Hello, hello, it's Jill again. So I was fortunate enough to start working at Rickery Bay during the Australian Pine Removal Project. So Keewaydin is a very special place for me. It's near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time out there between the Australian Pine Removal Project and doing some sea turtle work. So here are some photo points before and after the pine removal, just to give you an idea of what the island looked like. So on the left-hand side of your screen, hopefully you can see my pictures. The first picture is from January 1998, which was just before we started removing the pines. And as you can see, it kind of looks like the island behind where our field crew was standing over on Cannon. Keewaydin looked just like that prior to the removal. And then the picture on your right shows what the island looked like right after the pine removal project. And it looks much like it does this morning. You see a lot of sea oats, a lot of native vegetation coming back. And as the girls had mentioned, that's really important because this is the kind of habitat that really supports the nesting birds and sea turtles. A lot of these native vegetation also produce fruits and things that the native wildlife can feed on. Very important. Along with the Australian Pine Removal Project, this is where my GIS skills come in with using GPS units. We were very interested in seeing how the island would change before and after the pine removal. As the girls had mentioned, Keewaydin Island is a primary barrier island, which primary barrier islands are very dynamic normally just from natural coastal processes with the longshore currents. They also experience a lot of storms. And a lot of people had concerns about removing the pines. They thought that the pines were a primary or windbreak. The pines were brought in the early 1900s by the settlers because they grow very differently in Australia than they do here. So when they brought them here, the hope was that they would block these systems from the wind. Unfortunately, the pines grew very differently here in the United States than they did in Australia. And instead of protecting us from the wind, they act more like dominoes and they fall over, as you can see in this one picture. So we wanted to start mapping the shoreline just to make sure that removing them wasn't going to cause any more erosion. So on my map, you can see this red line. This red line was the shoreline in 1998, just prior to the pine removal. And then we go out every year and map the shoreline again around the same time of year. And let me see my purple line. I think, where is it? Purple line was just last year in 2020. And the shoreline changed from 1998 to this purple line. It accreted about 1/4 of a mile, which is pretty impressive. That's 20 years. So as Janine said, just around a little over her lifetime, where the girls are now, they cut across this pathway. So where they were standing was not there in 1998. Right before Irma, you can see this yellow line was right before Hurricane Irma came. We like to come out and map the shoreline prior to hurricane season. And you can see we lost about 400 feet of sand off the south tip of Keewaydin Island right after Irma. Irma really packed a punch. And we were talking about how dynamic these systems are. A couple weeks ago, I was out on Keewaydin Island after one of the cold fronts came through. And we had some researchers here from the University of Florida, the Geomatics Program, mapping our shorelines using unmanned aerial systems or drones. And they also did some on the ground elevation data. And this is the south end of Keewaydin Island, not far from where our field crew is today. And there was about a 4-foot scarp, just normal winter storm activity, kind of knocked away at the beach a little bit. So with that, I am going to take you to my GIS world and show you some of my fun mapping tools. Let's see if I can bring this up. I think we were going to share the link to this map so you can play along with me later. And as the GIS person, I think these maps are a lot of fun, so hopefully you'll enjoy them too. So this will really show you how much the island has changed as just a great illustration. The map that you'll see on the left is from 1940, and the map over here on the right is around 2020. So we're talking about 80 years of change, which is pretty phenomenal. So again, this is Keewaydin Island. The field crew is right around here on the south end. The area that you were seeing, the standing Australian pines in the background, is over here on Oats Island. And if you want to just watch the screen in this area here, I'm going to slide this over and we're going to go back in time to the 1940s in our little time machine and see how much this has changed. And we're going to make islands disappear and change. So here in the 1940s, Keewaydin Island ended way up here. This is Little Marco. Little Marco used to be a primary or barrier beach. And down here is Oats Island. And then Oats, actually, there used to be a pass through here, but Oats merged with Cannon. And this area where Oats merged with Cannon is where you're seeing a lot of those standing Australian pines. Exotic vegetation loves these disturbed areas and really like to take hold. I love talking to some of the people that grew up here in Naples and saw what some of these islands used to look like back in the day. I've heard stories that sea turtles actually used to nest over here on Little Marco because it was the primary barrier beach before Keewaydin was out here in front of it. So let me just pan back over once more time so you can kind of see it again, now that you know what to look for. So we've been talking a lot about changing shorelines and how these barrier islands are so dynamic. Well, I want you to kind of see these back areas where the mangroves are over here on Johnson Island and along this coast here. A lot of this is mangrove and it's very stable. So let me pan back over and keep your eye on those areas and you can see how they haven't changed like these barrier islands. So right there's Johnson, the shoreline looks the same. And then up here, that island, I mean, it looks exactly the same as it did in the 1940s, which is incredible. And I forgot to mention, this is Isle of Capri and down here's Marco Island. And you can see how the development has changed over time too. A lot of those canals you see were not there. Completely different systems. So I think that's pretty amazing. I'm going to take you, I think, down to Cape Romano now. Cape Romano is where Sarah manages our sea turtle monitoring program. And Cape Romano is another area that's been very dynamic. Again, one of the coastal barrier islands just south of Marco Island. And it has had 2 hurricanes come through in the time that I've been working at Rookery Bay. In 2005, we had Hurricane Wilma came ashore in 2005. And in 2017, we had Hurricane Irma again, that came right up Cape Romano. It seems to be a bit of a hurricane magnet, the way it sticks out into the Gulf. And so here again, we have the 2020 imagery. And let me pan over. And you can see how Cape Romano used to have more beaches along this Gulf side. If any of you have heard about the famous dome homes, those are located right around where this orange dot is. And the dome homes used to have lots of sand out in front of them. If any of you have ever seen the YouTube videos of the dome homes, you can see kind of what it used to look like. It's pretty cool. And now those dome homes are way out in the Gulf and apparently a great fishing spot. But you can see these islands right here that weren't there. And it's always interesting every summer when we're gearing up for, sea turtle nesting season, we go out to Cape Romano to kind of get an eye on things and how to navigate around all the shoals that have changed and seeing what nesting beaches are available. And we're always amazed at how much it's changed. And we're always wondering where the turtles are going to nest. But they always find a way. They're very resourceful and they can nest in the craziest of spots. So with that, Morgan, do we have any questions on the back end?
We do have a couple for you, Jill. So let's get you all situated here, ready to take some.
Should I stop screen sharing? Oh, you did.
We're all good. All right. Awesome. So we are so thankful that you were able to witness some of the field portion, hear some expertise from Jill. And I think Sarah has just a few things to share with you all before we take some questions.
That's right. We've decided during this excursion that you guys have so many great questions, we don't want to run out of time. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what else we have coming up as you guys add additional questions or upvote in the Q&A box for the ones you want to hear answered. And then we will talk about how you can connect with us after this program. So I just figured out that I can hit the, oh, I'm so sorry. I was playing with this a second ago and I can't seem to make it any bigger. Well, here we go. These are our upcoming programs. So This schedule goes through April, and in April, we will be announcing our May through October calendar, and we have a lot of really cool things happening. So you're already on an EDscursion. We hope you join us in 2 weeks for another one. Our next one will be called Finding Fish, where we're going to be seining from Tiger Tail Beach on Marco Island. So we hope you'll join us for that. Not only do we have virtual programs like learning how to use your binoculars or online photography classes, but this weekend we have our first in-person event in a really long time, and that's the family campout. So thanks to all of you who are participating. We can't wait to get outside and camp in Rookery Bay. It's going to be really cool. So we'll have lots of photos and publicity to share after that. And if you are in the local area, you can take a guided kayak or boat tour. And those obviously are in person and great ways to connect. So again, our Environmental Learning Center is closed, but we are still here and we are still doing stuff. We just are working from our home offices and our field offices. So I'm going to stop my share here. And I just want to remind everyone that we are learning as we go. So in this virtual world, it is something that no one really knew how to handle before we got here. So we want your feedback. When you close the webinar at the end, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. And we really hope you'll take a few minutes to fill it out, because not only do we want to know where you're located and what age demographic you're in so we can continue marketing in a more efficient way, but we want to know what you thought of the program. Did you think we did a good job? Do you think we need to do more or less? And what ideas you have for future programs? So please provide your feedback there, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks. Okay, question time.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to start with a couple questions for Jill, and then we'll send a few over to our field team once they get back to the boat. So we'll let them get going there. But Jill, we had a question. Can you just elaborate a little more on what GIS is? I know you said it in the beginning, but I want to know, does Rookery Bay use this information in other ways other than just shoreline mapping?
Oh, definitely. So GIS refers to any global mapping. So anything to do with the GPS. The reserve's now getting into some of the UAS or drone technology. So we're able to get quick captures of aerial imagery real time and be able to use that information to help us manage the reserve. We're getting into a lot of mobile data collection. So the fun part about my job is I get to go out with all the other staff and see what they're doing in the field and help them try to streamline their data collection using different apps and things on tablets to help them just make their field time more efficient. So as far as the imagery, we're using it a lot, or the drones, for collecting imagery pre and post prescribed fires. So we can use that to see how well the area burns, if there's things we need to do differently, or if we need to try to do a burn again at a different interval or wait for different conditions. We're using it to help map some of our gopher tortoise burrows. Anything to do with habitat mapping. The reserve's seeing a lot of changes to our habitats in kind of a short amount of time, just like our barrier islands. So these are just a few of our ways of using these tools.
That's amazing. And you said our dynamic barrier islands. I want to know, does the reserve participate in beach renourishment? Because we said Keewaydin is dynamic, it's always changing. We saw that scarp, that photo you took, 4 feet. I mean, the sand, it's accreting left and right. Do we do this like our local county beaches?
No, the reserve does not do any kinds of armoring or sand renourishment. Although it seems that when other parts of the county renourish, that sand tends to end up in the reserve just from longshore currents naturally. So we have natural sand recruitment. As we've been noticing through a lot of our mapping, we've been noticing that Keewaydin Island is kind of getting skinnier and longer. So that sand is just kind of moving down south. It's always kind of fun to see just where it's going to go.
That's awesome. And I know we said in the beginning, this is a high recreation area. So can you only get to this place by boat?
Yes, it's an unbridged primary barrier island, only accessible by boat. It's a very popular boating spot, especially on the south end. As you can see, it's a beautiful place to go. It's a great place to go fishing or just hanging out on the beach and do some shelling.
And we have one more question. Our viewers are wondering, so if this is such a high recreation area, how do we kind of mitigate the impacts of this high usage, right? Do we cage our sea turtle nests? Do we rope off our bird areas? Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Sure. So that's one of the things that the shoreline mapping helps us do. It helps us to see how much that area is conducive to shorebirds nesting. And we are able to post those areas during the nesting season to try to keep people and dogs and other things out of those areas to kind of give a buffer for the birds so they can still do their thing despite all the activity of all of us wanting to go out there and enjoy ourselves. The Conservancy monitors Keewaydin Island nightly. They go out and patrol the beach up and down all night long as the turtles are coming up to lay their eggs. And they do cage their nests. That's not exactly to keep people out. It's more to keep the raccoons and all those other critters, coyotes and other animals that are out there from having a tasty meal.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. We so appreciate your expertise from the GIS perspective. We're lucky enough as a reserve to have you on staff. So thank you. I'm going to tune over to our field cam if they're prepared for just a few questions before we wrap up this morning.
Yeah, we'll try to mitigate the wind and.
Sure. All right. So this question is for Sarah Norris, who is also on our research team, but is very familiar with our stewardship efforts. So Sarah, you mentioned that a method to remove these invasive species is prescribed fire. Has Rickery Bay done a prescribed fire on Keewaydin lately?
I think there was a prescribed fire on Keewaydin, I want to say about 3 or so years ago now. And it was right where we are now. And it's also used as a tool for other parts of the reserve, not just coastal beach habitat, but also our upland habitats that we have along Show Island Road, which is accessible right now to the public, and some other more isolated pockets of uplands.
Awesome. And method to the madness, so to speak, where how often do you burn? And is there any other problematic vegetation that might control that kind of population with a prescribed burn?
Yeah, so our upland habitats get burned every 3 to 5 years, but our prescribed fire is really dependent on when we're able to pull permits with the Florida Forest Service. So, there's a lot of method to the madness and thinking and planning when it comes to areas that we would like to burn. Even though we have spots that we would like to, if weather conditions aren't just right, then we won't be able to burn those habitats. But also, even if some of our exotic species don't burn well during prescribed fire, it will clear out enough of the native vegetation that does to make accessing those specific species a little bit easier and a little bit easier to see. Even though they don't burn, there's still pros to burning exotic plants.
Sarah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we totally lost you because of the wind. It looks like such a beautiful day out there, and the wind just sort of came out of nowhere. When we did our tech check earlier, it was good. So we missed the last couple sentences that you were saying there about the burning.
Okay, so for the prescribed fire, even though some exotic plant species don't burn, it opens up the habitat for land managers in the stewardship department to go out and target those exotic species, whether that's, pulling out by hand or treating with herbicide. But, opening up those habitats, the plants that burn naturally and are meant to burn will, so it almost makes finding those exotic species a little bit easier after a burn.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was all of the questions that I had, and we saw in the Q&A box. But if you have any further questions, we are going to hang on just for one more minute. But Field Cam, I know you got to get going. So thank you so much, Sarah Norris and the rest of the Ed team. We really appreciate you getting out, boots on the ground, and showing us beautiful Keewaydin this morning.
And this video will be posted on our webpage. I did put the link in the answer box there, but we can put it in the chat box too. So where you went to register for this program is the same place you can go to see this video, as well as all of our other excursions that we have filmed. So it will be there, and we hope to see you again at a future program. Thank you for supporting the Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jill, for joining us.